and justice for all. I don't know if you can all notice, but we have some beautiful festive decorations here. So thank you for doing that for us and for our viewers. And in that vein, obviously, we are in the throes of holiday time, and we're all celebrating a little bit differently. But hopefully, we're all finding new ways to connect with one another and to lean on our friends and our family, not physically, but via phone, to share and celebrate and remember what means most to us. And I know that what means most to us here is all of our collective safety. And so my wish is that during these holiday celebrations, you all find ways to connect, but to be safe for everyone else as much as yourselves. So with that, we will begin on the approval of the minutes for the November 16th, 2020 meeting. May I have a motion, please? Rob Gershon, seconded by Andy Feldman. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, Dr. Rufo, please provide us with the treasurer's report.
Good evening. As indicated in the treasurer's report, the cash on hand for the month end October 31st, 2020 was $92,240,855.94. The treasurer's report also shows that bank balances for all cash accounts were reconciled to book balances and were collateralized in accordance with the district's banking agreement and investment policy.
Thank you, Dr. Rufo. May I have a motion to accept the treasurer's report? Mr. DiFilippo, seconded by Ms. Chang. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, Dr. Rogers, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and I will add my holiday greetings to Ms. Frankel's holiday greetings and wish everyone a safe and healthy break and a happy new year. And of course, even though we are celebrating this season differently than we've done in the past, I hope that we will all discover that there are new ways, just as we discovered with graduation and some other things this year, that we can still enjoy familiar rites of passage and enjoy one another's company, but do it in a way that is consistent with obviously the challenges of the times. We have a packed superintendent's report this evening, so I'll get right to it. This is the meeting where we get a report from the Southwoods Middle School Student Council, and so I'm pleased to have them queued up. And this report.
Good evening, Dr. Rogers, administrators, members of the Board of Education, and Syosset community. Tonight, the Southwood Student Council will be providing you with the Student Activities Update. We would love you to be here live with all of you, but we are recording this video at our weekly Student Council meeting, which takes place every Tuesday night via Google Meet.
Even during these trying times, Southwood students have been enjoying a wide variety of clubs and activities. We are going to do our best to give you the highlights of the year so far.
The annual Halloween Walkathon was a great success this year. Syosset students and families were able to raise a total of $1,184 for rock and roll and get out for the classroom for a socially distanced exercise. In addition to the money raised, the peer leaders also helped organize a food drive.
The FLA Club has also had a very successful Halloween candy drive for Operation Sweet Tooth and is currently working with the AAA Club to run a December coach ride.
The Southwoods Business Club members are learning about businesses, ownership, and sales while participating in a cookie fundraiser. They are also creating designs for an upcoming clothing sale.
The Art Club has been working on a quilling project repurposing paper such as newspapers, magazines, and wrapping paper. Once the students quill the paper into rolled 3D objects, they transform the pieces into a decorative design.
The Mural Club is painting the walls of Southwoods Middle School with beautiful signs and landscapes. The Southwoods Multicultural Club is busy learning about the cultural significance of holidays around the world.
The Podcast Club is learning all the in and outs of creating a podcast, like writing scripts or recording interviews. The Southwoods performing groups have also been very busy, like the Drama Club has been trying to record a virtual play, and the Ukulele Club has been providing some much-needed holiday cheer ukulele style.
Even clubs like outdoor education and sports and recreation are adapting to our current environment. The Outdoor Education Club has taken students on virtual tours of national parks like the Grand Canyon and Glacier National Park.
The Girls Who Code are busy learning coding techniques from beginner to more advanced, while the Girl Talk Club has been discussing activism and leadership. They plan to work with the HBC version of their club in order to make a PSA about the wage gap.
And as for us, the Student Council is currently holding a toy drive. We are collecting new toys for the John Thiessen Children's Foundation for local distribution in neighboring communities. Thank you for the opportunity to share all the great things that are happening at Southwoods Middle School. Happy holidays and stay #SileStrong.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Good night. Thank you.
Bye.
All right, I was going to try and read all of their names, but they were in the credits, so you got a chance to hear from all of our students. I'll read their names all the same. Thank you, Sally Biondo, Isha Bhutani, Hayden Fleschel, Ashkara Gudavali, Bhumi Jubanatra, Eileen Lang, Jocelyn Su, Julia Emirali, Shane Ellis, Haley Chi, and Jacob Goldstein. And from the high school, this is also the annual meeting at which we celebrate some of the sounds of the season. And again, this will look a little different from our traditional experience. Some of the selections are the same, but the presentation is different. And because of that, there's a little special opportunity. So we're going to introduce Mr. Michael Salzman, our Director of Fine and Performing Arts, who will introduce these two performances.
Good evening, Dr. Rogers and members of the Board of Education. It is our tradition to bring you good wishes from the music department at this time of year, and that is a tradition that we are so glad not to have allowed this pandemic to interrupt. Before I introduce two spectacular performances, I just want to congratulate and thank all of the district's music teachers. The challenges of teaching music with social distancing, limits on class sizes, and the combination of in-person and remote learners have seemed almost insurmountable at times. Yet our teachers across the district have reinvented themselves and their courses, reset goals and priorities, and have been doing an incredible job of keeping music alive in our classrooms and in the lives of our students. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank them and congratulate them. Virtual performances like the ones you are about to see are not the same as a live performance because the musicians miss out on the opportunity of collaborating with each other in real time. But they do give us an opportunity to share the joys of music. My congratulations and thanks to Mrs. Kristen Howell for creating these two videos. They not only show off the high level of music performance and education that is continuing in our classes, but they also represent a tremendous number of post-production hours on her part, and we are extremely appreciative of her efforts. You are about to hear a performance of Jingle Bells by the current members of our male a cappella group Choral Pride, and then a wonderful rendition of White Christmas performed by close to 100 alumni and current members of the Adelettes. On behalf of the music department and all of our teachers and students, we wish you all the very best this holiday season.
jingle, 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 jingle all the way. Dashing through the snow in a one-horse open sleigh, o'er the fields we go, laughing all the way. Bells on bobtail ring, making spirits bright. What fun it is to ride and sing a sleighing song tonight. Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Oh, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. A day or two ago, I thought I'd take a ride. Soon Miss Fanny Bright was seated by my side. The horse was lean and lank. Misfortune seemed his lot. He got into a drifted bank, and we got upset. Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Oh, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. A one-horse open sleigh. Open sleigh. Oh, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh.
That wasn't just fun, it was really remarkable. And I'm just so proud of the music program, so grateful to Ms. Howell for making it possible for our students to still have these wonderful experiences, notwithstanding the challenges that we're facing. The art and music programs here are obviously part of our wonderful academic offerings. We're featuring every month a presentation to the board from a different area of our academic program. Last month we heard about science. This month we're going to hear about English language arts. And to lead that conversation, we have Ms. Amanda Barney, who is the coordinator of English Language Arts, K-12 in Syosset. She's going to be joined by Ms. Sarah Wasser, who is a library media specialist at the high school, and virtually by Ms. Kim Costa, who is a teacher here at Southwoods Middle School. So, Ms. Barney, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Rogers, members of the Board of Education. Thank you for the opportunity to share an overview of the amazing work in reading and writing instruction that's happening across our district for our kindergarten through our 12th grade students. Our job as ELA educators is to prepare our children to become great thinkers who can read and write well, take agency or control over their own destinies, and make the world a better, more inclusive place. Tonight we highlight how our ELA program provides the bedrock upon which our students' academic success is built by supporting inquiry, excitement, and excellence in the language arts. The English program at Syosset is the foundation of our cohesive K-12 learning community. I'm proud of the alignment in curriculum K-5 in reading and writing across all 7 of our elementary schools, and even more proud of the way our elementary teachers have pivoted instruction given the constraints of our current circumstances. Tonight, Ms. Kim Costa will explain how the middle schools usher our learners across the middle school bridge to high school. I'll share how our high school program supports individual excellence, and Ms. Sarah Wasser, our high school library media specialist, and students will shine a light on Book Day, a signature program of the high school. Across our 7 elementary schools, teachers use a shared reading and writing workshop curriculum that supports a love of reading, a student-centered writing process, and independence. We've selected the Teachers College Reading and Writing Workshop units of study because we know the workshop model is powerful. Research tells us that when students discuss what they read in small groups, when students do more of the writing work with greater independence, and when teachers provide more of the feedback, achievement is amplified. The workshop model is most potent because it's the highest leverage way for students to spend their time doing the work themselves and in meaningful partnerships with classmates. The hallmarks of the workshop involve supporting social and interactive aspects of literacy. In book clubs, students have conversations with classmates about characters. In the writing process, students support each other's revision work. In small groups and in one-on-one conferences, teachers provide on-the-spot feedback, and students choose books that boost their reading volume and comprehension. The workshop model at first glance does not look like it translates in the pandemic. This picture's from the before time. But we pivoted. We can get a lot of learning out of the workshop, even with the constraints of masks, polycarbonate shields, and social distance. We have figured it out, and that's something to celebrate. We can't do turn-in talks of reading partners sitting together on the carpet, but we can do small groups differently. Technology and ongoing professional development support instruction in this time when health and safety protocols keep us 6 feet apart. Our teachers are learning from Teachers College and in-house staff developers. These experts show us technologies that support the meaningful interaction we know boosts reading levels and supports growth in writing. Vetted apps like Flipgrid provide our students with the opportunity to collaborate by talking and taking video so that they can be connected even when we can't be physically close. Chromebooks and the Google Apps suite of resources provide a collaborative environment where students work with one another and receive feedback from their teachers. Small group instruction is happening in Google Meets, even when all students are in the same classroom. Digital libraries like Myon include books from a variety of reading levels and genres and have been purchased for each grade level to support independent and individualized reading for every elementary student in the district. These technologies do not replace the authenticity of personal interaction. Our teachers have transformed that turn and talk into Phone a Friend. Here we see a kindergartner holding a make-pretend phone, talking all about how a character's feelings have changed over time in a story. The purpose of students turning and talking to a partner is multifaceted. It's social. Talking about reading also supports comprehension, and student conversation gives teachers important information about students' thinking. Critically, this girl's teacher can listen in on that call to assess her understanding of the story. Pivots like this are happening in all grade levels and across all schools. Excellent reading and writing instruction is guided by this shared approach. ELA digital resources shared online across the district create a virtual bridge, one that connects and supports all teachers and students at every grade, whether they are learning in school or from home. These resources in the hands of our excellent teachers provide cohesion across each year and connect one grade to the next. This ramp builds to 6th grade, where our students continue their literacy journey across another bridge, middle school. I'm happy that Mrs. Kim Costa, 7th grade Southwoods English teacher, will take us over that bridge.
Good evening, Dr. Rogers and members of the board. It is an honor to talk with you about how the middle school literacy program has evolved over the years, especially with the recent integration of the Teachers College writing units of study. This is my 24th year teaching English Language Arts at Southwoods Middle School. I share this with you to underscore my understanding of the evolution of the ELA program at the middle level. I teach 7th grade, literally the middle of the middle. This slide illustrates the idea that middle level education is the bridge connecting the foundations built on the elementary level to the futures built on the high school level. What holds this bridge up? The success of the workshop model in the elementary schools. This proven success is why we built on that foundation and continued this model on the middle level. We adopted the Teachers College Writing Framework on the middle level in 2017. This slide shows a graphic of the continuum of curriculum spiraling and building with 3 types of writing emphasized across the grades. When we infused these writing units with our existing reading curriculum, we took an already rigorous curriculum and created an even more robust program that allows students to take even more agency over their literary lives. What we want most for our young readers is for them to take even more independent choices in their reading, to see themselves in the literature, and to see beyond themselves in the world in which they live. The reading curriculum at the middle schools is determined by the teachers based on the New York State Next Gen standards. We are committed to providing a varied reading experience for students, classic to contemporary, the realistic to the fantastical, and culturally diverse stories that take students across the world and encourage a lifelong love of reading. Technology and the apps and websites the district has invested in has proven invaluable, especially in light of our current reality. Technology has allowed us to pivot from shoulder to shoulder to digital collaboration. This slide shows some of the apps and websites that teachers and students have come to rely on most. Seesaw is a digital interactive class journal, and what I love most about it is that students' sharing goes beyond the classroom. If students didn't get a chance to read a friend's story in class, they can later. Students have told me how great it feels to get a like on their story on a Saturday morning or a positive comment on a Sunday afternoon. Another highlight of the middle level literacy program are visits by author Rachel Vail, an author of a story all 7th graders read. This year marks her 2nd visit to our students, virtually of course this year. Rachel Vail's visits help students see themselves as real writers in the real world, and they really love it. The kids had so many great takeaways from her visit. One of my favorites is from Gabby H. She said, "It takes a lot of revising to make a good story." I was inspired to ask Rachel Vail to the middle schools after I was invited to participate in Book Day at the high school a few years back. Here to tell you more about this amazing program is Sarah Wasser, high school
library media specialist.
Book Day is a confluence of identity, belonging, and narrative. Originating through our high school library Learning Commons, this annual event started 5 years ago. It has been carefully and deliberately perfected into a years-long collaboration between English teachers and students. Book Day is a profound and important collaboration that allows us to grow our reading culture and our reading of culture. The texts and authors we ultimately select first go through a rigorous screening process by our library team. Each year, we select a pool of roughly 10 texts, and we work with English teachers and a student committee to thoroughly research, analyze, and debate the merits of each one. One of the central goals of selecting the text each year is to strive to elevate underrepresented voices, and each participant reads each text and each review, and then ultimately votes for just one. Collectively, the authors we have chosen have won a total of 36 awards for their novels, including a National Book Award, multiple Morris Awards for Best Debut Novel, a Lambda Literary Award, and a Coretta Scott King Award. Every book under consideration is thoroughly reviewed by national publications and organizations. Book Day is a wonderful occasion where our school community, teachers, and students come together to engage deeply with an author. Students develop and revise questions with their English classes, in conversation with the author, and share their original projects. These pieces allow students a personal foothold in their learning, and through the exploration of identity and experience have created a lasting impact. I'd like to introduce Matthew Pfeffer, who is in 10th grade, and Isabella Sousa, who is a senior, to tell us more about their experience.
Last year, when my 9th grade English teacher requested for volunteers to help choose the next book day book for the incoming students, I eagerly raised my hand, hoping she would choose me. Luckily, I got selected. I, along with several other students and faculty, have chosen this year's book for the 9th graders, Monday's Not Coming, by Tiffany D. Jackson. While deciding this year's book, I considered the diverse student body at Syosset High School and what kind of story my classmates and I would like to read. We know the book choice is successful when the students are talking about it outside the classroom and in classroom discussion. I love talking about books and seeing if my fellow students would like them. I definitely plan on staying in the book day selection committee. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Isabella Souza and I'm a senior here at the high school, and I'm also a 4-year member of the Book Day Committee. So I've been involved with Book Day in various capacities. I've served as the introduction speaker over the last 4 years, and I also served on the selection committee itself for 2 years. So I've really gotten both ends of the experience in the actual conduction of the event, but also the behind the scenes of what goes on in selecting the book. And I would say that in all of those experiences, I've felt really, really fortunate. I've gotten to meet authors one-on-one. I had lunch with Nick Stone, who later went on to promote my book, which I published this past year. And I've also gotten to meet teachers and other faculty in the building that I would never have interacted with absent Book Day. And so it's just been so fulfilling in that respect that I get to see my peers actually enjoying the books that they read because they know that it's been hand-selected for them. And I think that's such a unique experience to not just be surrounded by the literature, but to have the opportunity to be surrounded by the authors themselves. I had never expected that I would have that experience walking into the high school, but I'm so grateful that I did. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Book Day and the program is one way we've used culturally responsive and sustaining practices to inform text selection and curriculum design and instruction in the high school English department. What does it mean to be culturally responsive? The New York State Culturally Responsive Sustaining Education Framework gives us some guidance about this topic. Adopted in 2018, the framework emphasizes academic excellence, professional learning, a welcoming and affirming environment, and a culturally inclusive curriculum. We are a culturally diverse school community, and part of being culturally diverse involves responding to our many cultures in an inclusive curriculum. We tailor this framework to our Syosset community because to prepare our students for the future requires us to prepare them for an increasingly diverse future. In summer of 2020, we revisited our high school English department's curriculum through the lens of the New York State Culturally Responsive Sustaining Education Framework. A teacher team created our own culturally responsive curriculum framework. In the high school, we are proud of our long history of supporting individual excellence in English language arts. As Dr. Durante says, there's something for everyone. Nearly half of the graduating class experiences college credit-bearing coursework. Among our Syosset students, are national award-winning writers, and as we learned from Bella, published authors. She's not alone. In our high school English classes, our Syosset students initiate and participate in a range of collaborative discussions with diverse partners on complex topics, texts, and issues. Our teachers expect our students to express ideas clearly and persuasively and teach our students to build their own ideas and build upon the ideas of others. In discussion of texts, our students respond thoughtfully to diverse perspectives. They synthesize comments, claims, and evidence made on all sides of an issue. In Google breakout rooms, students have small structured conversation, connecting students to each other. One-on-one conferences over Meet connect students to their teachers, and in Socratic Seminar, teachers broadcast the students who are home onto the smartboard so that they can participate fully in concert with their classmates in the schoolhouse. Importantly, all of our teachers, K through 12, create a welcoming and affirming environment in which they teach an increasingly inclusive curriculum, upholding our Syosset standards of academic excellence in English language arts. Our teachers, K through 12, have created the ultimate bridge, one that connects all cohorts of children, closing the distance between students through the study of texts, connecting them to one another every day, fostering the affirming environment in which from home, from school, online or in person, each child is seen, each person's ideas and identities are valued, and all students' written work catches them in the act of great thinking. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation and all of your hard work. You know, we've had academic excellence in this school district for as long as I can remember. But what is amazing and what is evident with this presentation is that we don't rest on our laurels. We're continuing to evolve and to strive for greatness in everything we do. And so I know that this board truly appreciates that work. I saw in this presentation the board's vision of alignment being reflected. I saw PTA comments about easier transitions between schools being reflected in the work that you've done. And I'm especially so proud that the board had invested in technology at the time that we did, because that really positioned us to do well as can be expected in pandemic learning. So thank you and your team for the presentation, but above all the effort that you've made in still improving on the excellent work that we've already done.
So I'm next going to ask Ms. Nora Brew and Ms. Carrie Ann Tondo to approach the podium. As the board knows, and I think the public is well aware, there is a project proposed for what is known as the former Serial Wire site that is proposed to be used and developed as a warehouse for a last mile distribution center for the Amazon Corporation. So that site has a complicated environmental history, and therefore development on that site has to proceed through something known as the New York State Brownfields Development Program. This is a highly technical subject matter, and so we have enlisted an environmental consultant to assist us with our evaluation of the project. This is an evaluation of the remediation efforts. What we're going to talk about with you tonight, board members, is an evaluation of the remediation efforts that are proposed for this site in advance of developing it. So we're going to confine our comments and our attention to what's known as a remedial action work plan, and that is part of the Brownfields program. And I'm just going to ask Mr. Escobar, if you wouldn't mind, could you slide a couple seats in so that Ms. Tondo can sit nearer to Ms. Brew? Thank you so much. And Nora, I believe we have your slides queued up and ready to go, so we'll turn it over to you. Okay. And Ms. Brew will be familiar to the board because she presented to us 2 years ago when a different plan was being proposed for the same location and gave the board feedback that ultimately was incorporated into comments that the school district made regarding that project. So thank you, Nora.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. Thank you, board, for having me here this evening. I'm Nora Brew. I'm a senior project manager with Walden Environmental Engineering in Oyster Bay. And we've reviewed the remedial action work plan that the New York State DEC released just before Thanksgiving. They've reviewed this remedial action work plan and have released it now. We're in the middle of the public comment period. So this evening I'm going to present a summary of the contents of the remedial action work plan and describe the remedy that has been selected as the preferred remedy, which the DEC is now accepting public comment on. And once the public comment period is over, they will render a go-ahead for the project. So we reviewed, in the last few months, 2 reports have been issued for the Syosset Park site, or the former Cerro site. In May of 2020, a report was issued summarizing the remedial investigation work that had been done at the site, and in June that was released for public comment, and now the remedial action work plan, which takes into account the remedial investigation results, is out for public comment. The investigation report is over 10,000 pages of information and data, a lot of lab reports, and the remedial action work plan is 550 pages. I'm just going to give you a little background on the DEC's Brownfield Cleanup Program, which the Cerro site is part of that program. The goal of the Brownfields Cleanup Program is to encourage development of brownfield sites, which are just sort of languishing, vacant sites that are contaminated and need to be cleaned up to be brought back to, good use and promote the economy and that sort of thing. So the owner of the site, they apply for acceptance into the Brownfields program. And once the site is accepted, there's a formal agreement executed between the state and the applicant, where the applicant commits to undertaking the remedial activities with the DEC's oversight. And all of the environmental investigation work and cleanup activity at these sites are done in accordance with work plans and oversight that is provided by the DEC. Once the site is accepted into the BCP, there are a series of reports and plans that are submitted to the state to help the program move forward. So there's a remedial investigation work plan describing the investigation to be conducted. Then the remedial investigation report summarizes the investigation results, and then based on that, a remedial action work plan is issued, which compares various alternatives to each other, and they come out with a recommendation for how to proceed. Remedial selection is based on the nature and extent of contamination at the site, and it considers exposure risks. So that second bullet there now is the step we're at right now. So the DEC has considered the remedial action work plan that the applicant or the owner of Syosset Park has recommended, and the DEC is in general concurrence. They haven't accepted, that's the wrong terminology, but they've commented on the remedial action work plan, and now they're soliciting public comment. So once they assemble all the comments and review them from the public, they will issue a final decision document taking into account the public comments. And at that point, generally the applicant is then has the ability then to move forward with the cleanup action which is overseen by DEC and the New York State Health Department. And then once everything is taken care of and cleaned up in accordance with the plans, a final engineering report is submitted documenting that everything was done as it was planned to be. And then once the cleanup is done, a site management plan is put into place, which ensures that the remedy is monitored and inspected, and then the state stays on top of what's done there. And then once that's all done, the DEC issues a certificate of completion, at which point the site is just in the management phase. All the remedial cleanup work is done. In the BCP, there's citizen participation milestones. There's a citizen participation plan that's in effect, and at various stages in the process, public comment is solicited, or the state, will issue a fact sheet. So the first point is when the BCP application is deemed complete. That was sometime in the summer of 2016. So there was a 30-day public comment period then. Then when the remedial investigation work plan was issued back in March or April of 2017, there was another public comment period then. The next one is when the proposed remedial investigation report is issued. That was back in June. And for the remedial action work plan, that's where we are right now. And the state is, so there's a 45-day public comment period for the remedial action work plan. And in some instances, the DEC holds a public meeting during this public comment period, but the state has decided not to have a public meeting for this project. And then there'll be a fact sheet issued before construction begins, and then at other points in the process going forward. But this is the last time that public comment is being solicited by the state for this project. So now just a little general information on the site. It's shown there, outlined in yellow. Everybody knows where the Cerro site is. It's 950 feet or so away from South Grove Elementary School. The Syosset landfill site lies between them. The site's been vacant for many years, and obviously has been, of interest to the community for quite some time as to what the ultimate development will turn out to be. So just a short timeline of the site. In the 1950s, Cerro began manufacturing steel conduits, copper rods, and steel strips, which were used in construction. That process generated wastewater, which was managed on site, that generated a sludge material that was dewatered, and it generated a lot of wastewater that needed to be taken care of. It was stored on site, and as time moved on, different things happened at the site. So until the site was connected to the county sewers in 1982, all the wastewater was handled on site and discharged to recharge basins, and resulted in the issues that Cerro faced in terms of site contamination. So in 1982, the sewers were connected, and on-site discharge of wastewater came to an end. A series of investigations were done, and in 1983, the site was added to DEC's State Superfund Registry, the Registry of Inactive Hazardous Waste Disposal Sites. Then in 1984, the Cerro site was sold, and Cerro continued to operate on a limited basis until 1986. The end of 1986, they terminated operations and began to decommission the site with oversight from the DEC and the health department. So in 1986, quite a bit of waste materials and contaminated, liquids were removed from the site and disposed of off-site. There's a tally of them there, which is taken from the remedial action work plan. So there's there was a fair amount of cleanup that was done back in 1986. Then we have some more, just a summary from the remedial action work plan summarizing historically the types of site investigations that were done between 1987, after the decommissioning had been completed, until 2005. So the earliest phases, there were soil investigations and groundwater investigations, and the original soil investigations identified copper, cyanide, and zinc as the constituents of concern in the soils, and they were directly related to the manufacturing that was done at Cerro. Groundwater investigations didn't find any groundwater contamination attributable to the site operations. In 1992, soils were excavated, and as the site cleanup continued, there was a report, a delisting petition was submitted to the state DEC itemizing the work that had been done and the contaminant levels that were at the site at that time, and the state delisted the site, so it was no longer on the state Superfund registry. And then later in the 90s, there was a property transfer transactions going on, so there was due diligence investigations involving more site investigation work. And they found copper and semi-volatile organic compounds. The semi-volatiles are mainly related to petroleum compounds and asphalt pavement. So based on that, there was some more soil removal done in 2004, and as well as removing underground storage tanks at that time. So then between 2005 and 2015, there wasn't a lot of anything done until Syosset Park Development purchased the site, and in their efforts to move towards redevelopment, they retained Rue Associates, which is an environmental engineering and consulting firm out in Suffolk County, and they sort of took a fresh look at the site at that time, because over 10 years had elapsed since they had last looked at the site conditions. So in 2015, there were 59 soil borings. So a boring is you drill down at a location and you collect soil samples at depth. So they did 59 soil borings between 2 and 35 feet below ground, and they collected a bunch of samples and analyzed them for various classes of contaminants. And the 2015 investigation found that copper and semi-volatile organic concentrations exceeded New York State's soil cleanup objectives for commercial use sites. Cyanide was detected at one location, and what else? So then in 2016, they did some groundwater sampling at 5 locations, and that sampling was consistent with the former sampling that had been done, where they did not identify any impacts from site operations on the groundwater. And then in 2017, as part of the BCP program and in accordance with the approved remedial investigation work plan, They did soil vapor sampling around the around the perimeter of the site at 10 locations, and they didn't find that there were any soil vapor impacts, and methane migration was not found to be occurring as either. And then last year in 2019, they sampled 4 monitoring wells at the site and found no evidence of of groundwater contamination. So now the proposed site redevelopment plan is for warehouse use, over 200,000 square foot warehouse building. So 84% of the site would be covered with warehouse building or parking lot. Would be impervious, so no water going through, and the remaining 16% around the perimeter of the site would be landscaped areas. Under the BCP, there are 4 different cleanup tracks for BCP sites, depending on the ultimate use of the property, and it ranges from track 1, which would have no restrictions on use, so basically it would be cleaned up to the point where you could use the site for any sort of use, and then it steps down to track 4. Track 4 is restricted use with site-specific soil cleanup objectives, where the shallowest soils would have to meet the New York State soil cleanup objectives for the intended use of the site, which in the case of the former Cerro site, its commercial use is the appropriate soil cleanup objectives. So just a brief discussion of soil cleanup objectives. They're used by the state. They're set forth in Part 375 of the DEC regulations, and they're guidelines to evaluate contaminant concentrations, and they guide the type of remedial measures you take at the site. And they're developed based on use of the site, ranging from unrestricted use through residential, restricted residential, commercial, and industrial use, which is that with the arrows there in the bottom half of the slide. And so obviously the most restrictive or the most stringent cleanup objectives are for unrestricted use, and then it relaxes as you move towards industrial use. And the soil cleanup objectives, they also establish them for groundwater protection and for protection of ecological resources, and those vary from compound to compound based on how, the different chemical characteristics of the compounds and soil conditions. So, for example, here we just have them listed here for copper. Benzoapyrene, which is an example of one of the semi-volatile organic compounds that has been detected at the site, and cyanide. So as you go across from unrestricted use, just say for copper, unrestricted use is 50 milligrams per kilogram is what the cleanup objective is. Milligrams per kilogram equates to parts per million. And then for residential use, restricted residential and commercial, the soil cleanup objective is 270. And then for industrial use, it jumps all the way up to 10,000 parts per million. And for copper, the objective based on groundwater protection is 1,720. So that's indicative of copper's characteristic that copper in soils has a great tendency to stay absorbed to the soils and not to leach out to groundwater. And it just presents the information for the other compounds as well. So now this table summarizes the soil investigation results from 2015, the investigation that RU did. So for copper, they collected 161 samples were analyzed by the laboratory for copper, and we broke it down into the ranges. So of those 161 samples, 89 of those samples had copper concentrations that were below the unrestricted use soil cleanup objective. 40 of them had between 50 and 270, so that's 129 out of 161 samples had copper concentrations that were below the commercial use soil cleanup objective, and then 32 out of 161 were greater than the commercial use. And only 2 of those samples had copper concentrations that were above the groundwater protection standard or objective. And we did a similar tally for benzoate pyrene, the semi-volatile. So of those 152 results, only 6 of them were above this commercial use objective. And for cyanide, 2 out of 164 samples were above the 27 part per million soil cleanup objective. This is just a slide. DEC in the Brownfields program, they issue a decision document as sort of, that'll be the step after they evaluate the public comments they receive now, and they identify contaminants of concern, and the definition that, or the statement that they include in their decision document says a contaminant of concern is a contaminant that is sufficiently present in frequency and concentration in the environment to require evaluation for remedial action. Not all contaminants identified on the property are contaminants of concern. So it's just establishing that they consider the frequency of occurrence and concentration when determining contaminants of concern. And that next bracket, DER 10, which is the DEC's guidance for site remediation, or site investigation and remediation, states that the DER, which is the DEC's Division of Environmental Remediation, they consider the magnitude of which the concentration exceeds the state's standards, criteria, and guidance. So as a result of this, the DEC's November 2020 fact sheet identifies copper and semi-volatile organic compounds as the primary constituents of concern at the site. So the remedial action work plan then evaluates 3 alternatives to address the contamination remaining at the Cerro site. The first alternative is for an unrestricted use cleanup, which essentially would involve excavation and off-site disposal of all soils that exceed the unrestricted use soil cleanup objectives. So that's estimated at over 636,000 cubic yards of material. And that would take approximately 4.25 years and cost $137 million. Alternative 2 is the track 4 commercial cleanup, considering the proposed commercial use of the site as a warehouse. So the gist of that alternative is that a cover system would be placed over the site to prevent exposure to the soils. So the soils would be covered by building foundations and slabs, asphalt, pavement, parking lot, sidewalks, or in areas that are not covered with pavement or concrete, it would be covered with the top 1 foot of soil would be soil that meets the commercial soil cleanup objectives. And then there would be other controls, institutional controls, that would place deed restrictions on the site to ensure that the cover system is maintained and inspected, and that site use is restricted and groundwater is restricted. The time frame for that alternative 2 is 10 months, and the estimated cost is about $6.7 million upfront, plus $17,000 a year in site inspection and monitoring costs. And then alternative 3 is just the baseline for comparison of the alternatives. No further action. Nothing further would be done. The site would remain in its current state, and they wouldn't put any additional controls. I think that $150,000 cost is to abandon the monitoring wells that are currently on the site. So the remedial alternatives in the remedial action work plan are evaluated based on the criteria that are listed there in accordance with the state's rules. They look at how the alternatives compare in terms of protecting human health and the environment, complying with applicable standards, short-term effectiveness and impacts, that's related to construction impacts, long-term effectiveness and permanence, and you can read the rest there. So based on the evaluation of the alternatives, the remedial action work plan identifies alternative 2, the track 4 commercial cleanup with the cover system as the preferred remedy for the site. This slide summarizes how the state boiled down the remedy in their November 2020 fact sheet. So cover would be placed over the site. There would be a layer, they call it a demarcation layer, but so there'd be something placed over the soils that remain in place before they placed anything on above them, so that in the future they can always know where when they hit the remaining soils that are in place. They would bring in clean material that meets the commercial soil cleanup objectives as cover material. They would implement a health and safety plan and a community air monitoring plan, and as I discussed before, the site management plan for long-term maintenance and environmental easements. This slide just kind of puts us in the direction that we are, the reason why we're here is what are these alternatives and what is the impact potential that they could have on Syosset school sites. So the unrestricted use where 600,000+ cubic yards of contaminated or soils with residual contamination would be removed from the site. That would involve over 50,000 truckloads of soil being removed from the site, and the truck traffic and heavy equipment that would generate exhaust, dust, noise, traffic, and other disturbance over a remedial time frame exceeding 4 years. Alternative 2, which is the preferred alternative that has been identified by the RAWP, has the cover system, would prevent direct contact with the soils and reduce contaminant mobility. On-site reuse of the soils would reduce the volume of soil that was hauled off-site. So the plan that they, as described in the remedial action work plan, is that the soils would be dug up on site, but it would be used in other areas of the site to grade the site and establish the cover system. So you would have soils being trucked in to the site rather than being trucked off site. And the time frame for alternative 2 is 10 months as compared to over 4 years for alternative 1. and therefore it would just, the reduced construction time frame would result in less disruption to the school sites. And the potential impacts are the same as for alternative one, except it's just over a shorter time frame. And then the no further action alternative, there would be no construction activity, no nothing, everything would remain the same. So there would be no disruption to the schools associated with construction, and site development would be prohibited under this action. Okay, so for the preferred remedy discussed in the remedial action work plan, alternative 2, the main types of impacts that would be associated with construction are related to fugitive dust emissions, air quality and odors, stormwater runoff, erosion and sediment control, on-site soil disturbance, so just anything involving moving around the soils on site, bringing in fill material, backfill into the site, traffic control and truck impacts, construction scheduling, and potential disruption to school activities associated with construction activities, and noise. So this is a rather dense slide, but the remedial action work plan describes a number of plans that would be implemented during construction, and these plans are, the intent of them is to ensure that construction practices are carried out in such a way that they're not, causing undue impacts, and that potential impacts can be mitigated and reduced. So complete plans are included in the remedial action work plan for health and safety. Health and safety plan dictates measures that are employed directly related to worker health and safety. So it's intended to govern work practices at the site so that on-site workers are protected, and it's a federal OSHA requirements that are in play there. And the health and safety plan includes the community air monitoring plan, which the health and safety plan, based on my read of it, it's fairly standard. It meets industry standards for health and safety issues, but the community air monitoring plan, which is included in the health and safety plan, it's not sufficient. So I'll get into that in a slide or two. The community air monitoring plan, or CAMP, describes the air monitoring that will be used during construction to evaluate ambient air quality. The New York State Health Department publishes a generic community air monitoring plan, which is used as the basis for a lot of the community air monitoring plans that are implemented. But in this case, it doesn't have the detail needed to provide the adequate protection during this project. The quality assurance project plan, that deals with lab analysis, so it's standard. It's nothing special. It does the trick. And the citizen participation plan that is in the remedial action work plan is dated back in October 17. So it doesn't reflect the current proposed use of the site, but it outlines, citizen participation and notifications and things of that nature. A number of plans are not comprehensive or not included in the remedial action work plan, and these are plans that definitely need to be looked at very carefully when they are put together, because they impact the effects of construction. So stormwater pollution prevention plan is noted in the remedial action work plan, and it says that it will be submitted under separate cover. So stormwater pollution prevention plan, it outlines how stormwater is managed on the site during construction, and the intent is to avoid having stormwater running off the site and, you know, transporting sediment into surface water bodies, or it's intended to make sure stormwater is handled properly. The erosion and sediment control plan is not included in the RAWP, and it should be. The erosion and sediment control plan, it outlines measures and inspections that are to be done to prevent erosion and sediment impacts. The soil materials management plan is, it's outlined in the RAWP. The RAWP calls it the plan, but in my opinion, it's not sufficient to have something that takes up, you know, 2 or 3 pages in this remedial action work plan to dictate the methods to be used. It needs to be better thought out better. Similarly, dust control is mentioned in the plan, but a comprehensive standalone plan was not included, and traffic control is also mentioned, and there are some measures discussed, but it's not a detailed plan by any means. So let's see. So the major concerns related to the project and the potential impacts construction could have on the district's schools, dust generation. This is similar to what we talked about back in 2018 when the Syosset Park draft environmental impact statement was reviewed, and the district commented there. So soils at the site do contain levels of concentrations of contaminants that are above the commercial soil cleanup objectives. So we want to avoid dust being generated and traveling off-site. So the community air monitoring plan is what we discussed just a little while ago. Community air monitoring plan outlines air monitoring that is done during construction, and they set up monitoring stations upwind and downwind of the construction area. And the camp establishes action levels so that if say the dust level is approaching the action level, it's an opportunity for the contractor and the oversight personnel to take action to kind of suppress the dust. So at a lot of construction sites, that's sufficient, but here we have South Grove School, 950 feet away from the construction area. So the camp should provide for immediate notification to the district if there's any air monitoring exceedances of the action levels so that the district can take action. The camp should include a comprehensive plan to have an independent inspector on site who's not affiliated with the contractor or the owner, somebody to independently make sure that the things are done in accordance with the camp. The camp should address implementation of more aggressive controls, such as like having a continuous misting system as opposed to just, spraying down the excavation area if dust begins to be generated. And the camp should include plans to evaluate dust concentrations at the standard frequency is every 15 minutes you take a reading, and that the monitoring equipment is set to log the data that way, but you can set it for a shorter time interval so that you can catch, you just be that much more ahead of if a problem was beginning to occur, that you could take action immediately. Excavation and soil handling. So as there's residual soil contamination throughout the site, so the soils must be handled properly in accordance with the regulations. The soil management plan that is in the remedial action work plan is not standalone. It doesn't provide adequate detail on the proposed procedures, and it's a necessary construction plan, in my opinion. Similarly, a standalone dust control plan is not included in the remedial action work plan, and one is required to provide adequate detail on the methods to reduce dust generation and runoff. For stormwater runoff, we don't want the situation to occur where rain falls on the site, trucks pick up the mud on their tires, or mud runs off the site, and then once that dries up, it becomes dust and it can become airborne, and it all plays into dust and ensuring that we have adequate protection. The remedial action work plan does not include the required stormwater pollution prevention plan and erosion and sediment control plan that would address runoff and erosion. By putting the cover system on the site, which would have 84% impervious or non-porous surfaces, you won't have the ability for the stormwater to just seep into the ground. So the remedial action work plan describes the proposed on-site stormwater management system, and it would consist of recharge basins, which are fairly standard, as well as subsurface drainage systems, which would be just sort of like big underground systems that would collect the stormwater, and then the stormwater would seep into the ground from there. But there's no details in the remedial action work plan in terms of how the capacity of those systems compares to the volume of stormwater that the Nassau County Department of Public Works requires on-site stormwater management systems to have. So that's just another detail that is missing that is important to know. And traffic control, obviously, with construction workers and truck traffic, that there will be an increase in traffic control, and a comprehensive control plan is required just to avoid impacts. Similarly, noise and vibration, the remedial action work plan does not acknowledge that schools are more sensitive receptors for noise, and they operate at a different standard in terms of what constitutes an acceptable level of noise. And there's no noise and vibration mitigation plan provided in the remedial action work plan. In addition, the plan does not provide a detailed construction schedule. They mention that the remedial time frame is 10 months, but there's no breakdown as to what happens first. There's no construction phasing that is mentioned. And monitoring inspection, in 2018 we made this similar recommendation that like an independent third-party inspectors that are not associated with the site owner or the contractor should be on site during construction to document that all these plans are being properly implemented, and so that appropriate corrective actions can be taken as needed. So that concludes my summary. As I said, so January 11th, 2021 is the date through which the DEC is accepting comments.
Thank you, Nora. I know I have a few questions, and perhaps my fellow board members do as well.
Sure.
Can you just explain briefly why different levels of contaminants are permitted to remain depending on the usage of the property?
The DEC looks at, so the soil cleanup objectives are based on risk levels, and risk considers concentration and exposure. So, and then there's, toxicity factors that are associated with the, different compounds. So all those go into, they do an analysis and they come up with, so a residential use would have a different type of exposure scenario as opposed to commercial use. Residential, you could have, children digging, or you're planting gardens in your backyard or something like that. So it factors in that way.
Okay, and have the cover systems, have they been used successfully in areas outside of Syosset? And by successful, I mean without leakage or contaminations into the community?
Yes, I can't point to any specific examples, but capping for when soils are contaminated with metals and semi-volatile organics, which are typically less, they prefer to stay absorbed to the soils. So capping is a rather common remedy that is implemented at these types of sites.
Okay, and lastly for me, in terms of the order of events, if capping is going to be done, but digging is necessary for construction, how does that work?
My understanding from reading the remedial action work plan is that the remedy and the construction are basically intertwined. So they're gonna grade the site. They're gonna dig out for these stormwater underground subsurface storage systems for stormwater. So they're gonna dig out and they're gonna use that soil to grade, and then they'll install their stormwater management structures, and they'll pave the parking lot and put up the building, and so it's the remedy is the construction. It's just
Gotcha.
Intertwined.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Do anyone else? Chris DeFilippo?
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. Very comprehensive. A lot of moving parts there, certainly. I'm just going to go over a bunch of things and then see if you have any reaction to that.
Okay.
One is, and I'm not going to ask you to answer each one right now at the end. So what I'm not understanding is Zero Wire made the sale, okay, and I don't know if you can answer it or any, but they should be held liable back to having it. They're the ones that caused all this. The history is that they started in the 50s, 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
So this has been going on 70 years, okay? So, someone thought that, well, let's sell out the future and we'll wait it out. And this toxic cyanide and all the other chemicals will just go away. And it hasn't. It hasn't to this day, okay? We're talking 70 years plus right now, and it's not going away. So what I'm concerned about is with these different alternatives is why wasn't this done many years ago when they realized they had the problems, and they should have done it, 50 years ago. So, I mean, 50,000 truckloads of soil is unimaginable. I mean, must create like a cater, and someone would have to fill that back in, I would think. But to me, my personal opinion, and I'm not an engineer, but a site cover is like a Band-Aid, okay? Covering up the toxics for 70 years, we're going to cover it up another 70 years? No. It ain't going to make sense to me. And I'd like to know how this will be decided upon. I mean, the school district will respond. Other people in the community will respond. Okay, but who makes the decision on this? Do we know?
The DEC will make the decision, New York State DEC. Because they have the DEC has the authority over the Brownfields cleanup program, which this site is part of. So that's how the program is set up. And I can't speak to why things weren't done, way back when. But this is where we're at now, and the DEC is, it's going through the process and soliciting public comments, and they'll consider the comments, and who's to say what they'll decide, but.
But there is no survivorship with this, because I thought even though you sell title to the land, if you have an issue like this where it wasn't remediated, which it never was, then how does Zero Wire walk away from this?
It would depend on like the indemnification agreements that were part of the property sales.
Chris, that's a legal question, and Nora is our environmental consultant, so that might be better directed somewhere else.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Tom Rotolo?
Thank you, Nora, for that presentation. So in their plan 2, where they're going to now unearth for these basins, obviously if you're building a warehouse, you need to dig foundations. Now they're going to unearth all this stuff. How is it really capped? They're going to have all this soil that's now unearthed, the chemicals are in the air. How is that a remedy?
Well,
this is a warehouse, you have to dig foundations, there's trucks, that stuff's going all over the place.
Right. So
how is that like containing it? I don't understand that. Aren't you spreading everything around by now? You have to dig a deep foundation for the basins, for the building foundation.
I don't know.
I mean, where does all that excess dirt go? They can't just spread it all around. It sounds like.
My understanding is that with the deepest excavations are expected to be, I believe, about 20 feet, and those are for the subsurface stormwater collection systems that they will have, and the soil that's excavated to create those would be it would be used to grade the site. So I don't know the plans or how large those are, but that volume of soil would be taken from a smaller piece of the 39-acre site and would be spread out. But I don't have the details in terms of how large those are, how much soil would be removed.
Right, because these basins have to go down pretty far now. And then
I think the recharge basins would be, I think they said 8 feet deep, but I'm just speculating now. I don't have the details.
So my house foundation is 20 feet. How could they be building a warehouse and they only go down 20 feet? How could that be?
I don't have the details as to how they're constructing it.
And are they going to do additional borings to see if there's more contaminants?
The remedial action work plans discussed that they had done earlier this year. They had taken soil samples at 7 locations that coincided with where they would be putting the stormwater management, so the recharge basins and the subsurface stormwater holding, or they're not holding tank, the subsurface stormwater leaching systems. And the remedial action work plan, the data showed that the metals and semi-volatiles concentrations in those locations they did not exceed the commercial soil cleanup objectives. So that's what was in the remedial action work plan. So they've done some preliminary testing of those areas, and I don't know if they have plans to do more sampling.
Thank you.
Okay, Susan Falkov.
Hi. You spoke of the necessity of an independent contractor to monitor the air and the water quality that, included in, I wanted to know, obviously that's super important, making sure that the air and the water are as safe as possible, and that's a huge concern to everyone in the community. Is an independent person to oversee that included in their plan? And if so, who would hire that person, and who would oversee that person to make sure that they are doing their job and making sure that the air and the water quality are being maintained in the standards that we need it to be?
Ultimately, the state, New York State DEC.
Could you hear?
New York State DEC and
I can't hear you guys. Oh, there you are.
New York State DEC and the Health Department have ultimate authority over the activities going on at the site, and that they're being done in accordance with the plans. In terms of who would hire the independent third party and who makes that determination as to that they have no conflict of interest with either the site owner or any of the other stakeholders, I can't speak to that. I don't know how that would work.
How do we find out? Because making sure that a person overseeing it is doing their job would be really important. So how can we find out who would be hiring them and who would be overseeing those people?
I would say that would be a discussion with, I really don't, do you have an idea, Carrie Ann? Because I don't know.
Good evening. It's my understanding, as Ms. Bruges stated, that the third-party independent reviewer is not included in the RAWP, and that if the board were so to direct comments to be submitted before that January 11th date, that would be one of the recommendations Ms. Brew is recommending. How they go about that once it's recommended would be for further discussion. However, the first step would be to include those sort of comments, if that was a concern of the board, to be addressed to the DEC during the public comment period.
Okay, thank you.
Chris Ulrich.
Hi, thank you for all the details. Just to be clear, the 3 options you went to, the second option, is that more akin to what we have at DPW now with the cap, where is it just removal of the topsoil and a cap, or is the paving and the foundation sort of filling that role a bit, protecting the soil from the runoff, so that we don't have more seepage down?
Right. So the primary remedial action objective is to prevent contact with the soils, and also to prevent stormwater, rainwater from leaching through the soils and potentially mobilizing the contaminants and, carrying them down to groundwater. So the cap, it prevents anybody from touching the soil or ingesting it, and it also would, prevent water from leaching through those areas. So it's kind of like a landfill cap, except it's not. The landfill cap is constructed of impermeable materials.
Right, so it's not a cap, but if the warehouse is a slab and most of the field is paved with the storm drains on the runoff, that serves to protect most of the soil and controls the flow of water, so we're not pushing down further towards the water table.
Correct, yeah, and you have, it's, the groundwater's over 100 feet deep there too, so that's.
Oops, are there any other questions for Nora? Okay, thank you, Nora, so much.
Thank you very much.
All right. I know the board has a discussion about this a little bit later in the meeting, so I'll ask Ms. Brew and Ms. Tondo to stick around if you don't mind. Just to round out my superintendent's report, and I promise to end on good news. So I want to just talk a little bit about some of the challenges that I anticipate ahead as we enter into winter months, and as we certainly watch closely the data that the state is using to monitor the rate of infection with COVID-19 and its progression throughout various communities in the state, and the mitigation steps that the state is putting into place to try and deal with that. So this impacts the school district, obviously, in a number of different ways. So the first is that obviously we're watching closely a potential weather event that's going to occur later this week that could bring with it a potentially substantial amount of snow. And we've been thinking for several weeks now about how we would want to handle snow days over the course of this year, and how especially we'll handle the upcoming event. So I'll just frame out the approach that we intend to take. So our bias is going to be towards, let me take one step back, sorry. This year, for the first time, the state has created what they're calling a pilot program, which allows school districts to pivot to virtual instruction on a day that would have otherwise been a closure day for inclement weather. So obviously we've done an awful lot of virtual instruction in the past 9 months, and the state is now saying that that would count for state aid purposes towards the number of days that we're required to accumulate for a year. My bias would be towards taking advantage of this, not because I don't relish myself the joy of snow days and playing in the snow and the kinds of activities that I recall from my youth and I've even enjoyed as an adult, but rather because there are so many unknowns later in the year, and trying to protect as many days of instruction as possible while the unknowns are still familiar. So I do anticipate that as the year goes on, and all indications are that the prevalence of COVID will be even greater in January and February than it is right now, that brings with it the possibility that there may be days where we're unable to do instruction either in person or virtually because we have an insufficiency of staff. So there's the potential that we'll lose days. As you no doubt know, this morning, Google experienced a 2-hour outage worldwide, and we were minutes away from pressing send on a message to the community that would have changed our approach to instruction today, because so much of our platform is dependent upon Google services. But it could be Google, or it could be another platform that goes down. Our calendar is built around the idea of a typical weather year and accommodating closures for typical weather. What it's not built to do is accommodate a typical weather year and the need for Google services to be up and running on every school day as well. And so if there's the potential, we had a near miss today of losing a day of instruction because of a Google outage. If that happens 2 or 3 more times this year and there are 4 adverse weather days, we'll very quickly go through what little flexibility we have in the calendar. So to the extent that we can preserve as many days of instruction in the front half of the year as possible, I think that's wise. The third thing is, a hopeful note, which is, it's my hope at least, one person's opinion, that by the time we get further into spring, there will be a lot more vaccine in circulation, and it may be possible that by the time we're at the Memorial Day break, or maybe even earlier in the spring, that those breaks will be more meaningful because the level of risk and community transmission of COVID has decreased significantly. And so part of my job is to think about 6 months from now, what will we wish we had done 6 months ago? And I think if that opportunity did present itself around Memorial Day, we will be grateful that we got as many days of instruction in earlier as we did. So this is not the state saying for all time that snow days will be virtual, and it's certainly not me saying that this is a decision that we would want to live with even if things were back to normal. This is an unusual year, and this would be an unusual step. Having said all of that, and returning to where I started, that my bias would be towards a day of virtual instruction, it is clear to me that there are going to be adverse weather events that do not lend themselves even to virtual instruction. And so if the storm predicted for later this week lives up to the hype, then we will have an awful lot of wet, heavy snow driven by high winds. That is a recipe for massive power outages across Long Island, and I don't think one would be able to assume that there is enough connectivity either in kids' homes or in teachers' homes to be able to lead virtual instruction under those circumstances. So obviously we're watching this storm on a daily basis. As we get closer, it'll be on an hourly basis, and if it doesn't look like it's going to be conducive to a virtual day, we'll call the traditional snow day. The other thing that I've observed in my almost 11 years on Long Island is that snow removal efforts here are not as rapid as I was familiar with when I lived in Buffalo. So there have been some times when we've had particularly impactful storms that have taken multiple days to clean up. So it may occur that if this is a really impactful storm on Thursday, that we're still not ready to have instruction in classrooms on Friday, but power outages may be restored. So it's possible that we might have a traditional snow day on Thursday and then have a day of virtual instruction on Friday. It's just an unknown, and it'll be dictated by the conditions of this particular storm, and that really kind of sums it up for how it's going to be for every storm that comes this year. I hope they are few and far between, but they're each going to have to be addressed on a case-by-case basis because they will each present with their own challenges. So I'll finish where I started. My bias will be towards trying to get as much instruction in as we can while things are still somewhat predictable. Following on that, we have been doing, certainly the board and community have noticed an uptick in the number of cases of COVID among individuals that are parts of our learning community, whether they are students or staff. That has been predicted to occur for some time, and now we're seeing the impact of that. It's certainly not limited to Syosset. It's consistent in all of the school districts in New York State. Obviously, some are dealing with even higher rates of incidence than we are, and they've been designated as being in yellow zones. But the uptick is palpable, and it is certainly island-wide. We've been, and I have to commend the contact tracing team, Dr. Curry, who is one of the assistant superintendents here, Mr. Cardillo, the deputy superintendent, Joan Gonzalez, our head nurse, Julie Naftal, another one of our nurses, who are working literally day and night because often the calls from parents come in late in the evening, which is understandable. There are long lines at testing centers, and so people are getting information about positive cases very late in the day. We obviously want to be able to react quickly to that information, and so that contact tracing team has been staying up as late as it takes to get the job done. It involves the building principals. They, in turn, involve building staff so that we can interview staff about procedures in classrooms. Sometimes it involves surveillance video on buses. It's an extensive process. A lot of people are hands-on when that occurs. But even with all of that workforce dedicated to the contact tracing effort, it still takes time. And what happens in that process is we will identify people who are likely to be close contacts of the case we learn about. And then we contact those families and we let them know that there is a youngster that we believe needs to be in quarantine for the next 14 days because they were potentially exposed to someone who has COVID. And so it would be better for them not to expose anyone further because they might develop the disease over the course of the next 14 days. So obviously people comply with that decision, and it's something that we do in conjunction with the health department. We support each other in the decision making. We do have good access to the health department in this process, but it still takes time, and the notification might occur a day or two after exposure because we might not learn of the case for a day or two after the potential exposure. Where am I going with all of this? We're going to pivot to virtual instruction on the last 3 days of this calendar year. So that would be December 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, the Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday prior to Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, the last week, partial week of school in this school year. What's the rationale? If someone notifies us on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day that they're positive, I have no doubt that the contact tracing team will work on Christmas Day. That's not the issue. The issue is we will try to do contact tracing for Wednesday, the last day that children were physically in school. We may even be able to get a hold of all the people that we need to get a hold of on Christmas Day. But what I won't be able to do is notify someone in time before they've traveled to a relative's house. So the worry is that a student who is a close contact and should be in quarantine, we won't notify until halfway through the day on Christmas Day. And by the time we notify the family that the child really should be in quarantine because they may be a risk to others, they may have already visited relatives, they may have already visited elderly relatives who are in a higher risk group. So in order to make sure that we're able to make those notifications in plenty of time for families to make good decisions, safe decisions, by being in virtual instruction on the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, we will be in a position to know that the last date of potential exposure at school will have been the Friday of the week before. And we assume that we will be able to clear all notifications by Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at the latest, but we should be able to notify anyone who needs to know that their child might have been potentially exposed so that they don't inadvertently go to some sort of a family event or even just have an elderly relative over for dinner and then unfortunately expose that elderly relative to the potential risk. So we're making this announcement tonight, obviously to give teachers a week to plan because this will be a shift for many, not for all. Some of our teachers are always virtual. And obviously parents will need to anticipate childcare. So working backwards to my conversation about snow days, if the storm on Thursday lives up to the hype and it is not possible on Friday to get back into school because the roads still aren't clear, it could be that Wednesday of this week is the last day of in-person instruction. Not my preferred scenario, but one that everyone should prepare for by making sure that if you're a staff person, you take with you what you need on Wednesday. And if you're a youngster, same thing applies to you. We'll continue to obviously watch the storm closely. Personally, I'm praying for rain, but we'll see what happens and we'll try to make the best decision possible. Beyond calendar, I want to talk a little bit about yellow zones and testing. So the state has implemented something that they're calling the microcluster strategy. They implemented it in the middle of October. They did a major revision to it in the middle of November. They did an additional revision to it last week. And earlier today, I was on a Zoom call with a number of other superintendents and officials from the New York State Department of Health. What the state has done is they've created a series of metrics, and these are measurements of the rate of prevalence of COVID in a community and measurements of the amount of hospital capacity that is being consumed or is no longer available. In other words, how close are the hospitals to being overwhelmed? Based on those two metrics, they identify areas of the state that are determined to be hotspots, and they create increasingly restrictive controls over those areas. So they call them progressively yellow zones, orange zones, and the hottest of the hotspots are red zones. And at each of those levels, there are different requirements about things like whether churches can operate and what kinds of businesses can be open, et cetera. But what we're concerned about, of course, is schools. So in a yellow zone, and that is one of the triggers for a yellow zone, is a 2.5% positivity rate on a 7-day rolling average for 10 days straight. And we are coming close to the 10th day. I believe we're on the 9th day now of being at either 2.5% or beyond. A yellow zone is triggered. So there are a series of other metrics that we don't have access to, including the hospital fill rate for a localized area. So it may be that we're not designated a yellow zone anytime soon. There are currently two yellow zones in Nassau, one in Massapequa Park, the other in Great Neck. There are two in Suffolk, one in Hampton Bays, the other in Riverhead. So if a yellow zone is designated and a school falls into the yellow zone, and it is done on a school by school basis, not a district by district basis, but a school by school basis, then in that individual school, if the school wishes to remain open for in-person instruction, a surveillance testing regime has to be put into place in that school building. So if the surveillance testing isn't done, the school can pivot to virtual instruction and remain virtual. But the only way for the school to remain open for in-person instruction is to do surveillance testing. What does that surveillance testing look like? For a yellow zone school, 20% of the school population must be tested over a 2-week period. And at the end of that 2-week period, the positivity rate of that 20% is compared to the positivity rate of the surrounding area. And if the school has a lower positivity rate than the surrounding area, and we would think that this is likely to occur because we don't believe that schools are a place where there's a lot of transmission, then the school would be allowed to remain open and would not need to test again. That's yellow. In an orange zone, it is also 20%, but it is 20% every month, and it must continue for as long as the school is in the orange zone if it wishes to remain open. And they don't want the testing to be front-loaded all in 1 week. If it's going to be 20%, it should be 10% in the first 2 weeks, 10% in the last 2 weeks of the month, and like that, continuing for as long as the school remains open. For a red zone, it's the same as orange, except the percentage goes from 20% to 30%. Initially, the state had said that schools in orange and red zones must close. They said that those schools, after they close, must stay closed for 4 days and then can only reopen if 100% of the population is tested. So the change that the state made was to back off significantly from that more stringent approach and just say it's 20% in orange, 30% in red. You can stay open as long as you get the testing done in the prescribed time frame. So 20% of the entire Syosset School District would be in the neighborhood of 1,700 or more tests, because we're not just talking about students, we're talking about staff as well. And it's only of the student population or staff population that is on site, not the students or staff that are learning virtually. So we have talked with the superintendents of 3 of the 4 places on Long Island that have been designated as yellow zones and have gone through testing programs. And I've talked with 2 colleagues who are in 2 upstate school districts that have gone through yellow zone testing programs. And we've learned a lot from their experience. They've been trailblazers, and we're trying to put into place some of the best practices to prepare ourselves in the event that this happens here. My hope is that it doesn't, but we're trying to put in place the pieces that are necessary. So I see really a plan A and a plan B. The plan A would be to do what the Great Neck School District did, which is to outsource the testing to an independent third party that we would contract with. I proposed that for the board to consider tonight as part of the board's agenda. This independent third party would conduct the testing. It would be done in a school building during the school day and or at the end of the day, and obviously would require parental permission. This is different from the testing center that is here on the joint campus, the middle school, high school campus. That's a satellite operation of Mount Sinai South Nassau Children's Hospital. It is, Community Hospital. It is independent from the school district, and it doesn't have anywhere near the capacity to do this volume of testing. This would have to be done by an entity that has enough capacity to do the testing. That's plan A, and I think it makes sense. It doesn't have a lot of cost to the school district. The testing company would bill the insurance of the persons being tested, and the school district would only experience a cost if there was a youngster who did not have insurance, and then the school district would pay for the cost of that test in that case. The plan B is, in the event that a number of school districts are designated as yellow zones simultaneously, and suddenly there is a tremendous amount of demand for these testing companies, it is possible that they may be overwhelmed and have insufficient capacity. If we needed to add to capacity, it is possible to do that by training our own staff and by administering the tests ourselves. In fact, the state makes the training available for free, and they make the testing kits available for free. And several of the schools that are in yellow zones have taken advantage of this approach as well, and have also had success with it. It obviously will put an additional burden on our staff and some logistical efforts to be undertaken in order to accomplish it. That's plan B. Nevertheless, I think we should put into place the ingredients for plan B so that we control our own destiny, and but still pursue plan A as the preferred way of taking care of the testing. Why pursue testing at all? The one thing that I've heard in my many conversations with parents over the course of the last 9 months, and certainly it's been a priority of this board, and the board has invested deeply in getting kids back into in-person education. We don't want to lose the value of that investment in in-person education by having to close, and so it's possible for us to continue in-person learning by going through this process. I'll report that my colleagues that have gone through this already have said that it's gone surprisingly well, and it has been surprisingly less bumpy than they anticipated that it might be. And so I'm hoping that if it happens here, that we will analogize to that. So that sort of outlines the 2 approaches that we have. Again, I feel like my job is to have a plan and a backup plan, and so we're trying to put both of those into place. And I promised I would end on a lighter note, and this is my shameless plug. for our Association of Creative Thespians Fall Show, One Stoplight Town. Now, you might wonder how the fall play is going to take place in a pandemic year, and my answer to that is you should tune in and find out, because it is going to be extraordinary. It is a pandemic approach to putting on good theater, and in fact, our coordinator of theater arts, Mr. Gene Connor, I believe is an EMT, and he served as an on-site medic and COVID compliance officer for a number of films and commercials this summer. And so he applied that knowledge to our filming so that we could maximize the approach to this One Stoplight Town. So it will be live streamed on Friday, December 18th. That's this coming Friday at 7 p.m. It's a one-time only performance. The short comedy is a look at how change affects us all. Boy, could that be more relevant this year. As we trace the progression of time in a small town, beginning with the day the first stoplight was installed. So I know it's going to be amazing because the ACT always does incredible productions, and I know it's going to be groundbreaking because this is a year like no other. So I will be tuning in, and I hope you will be too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rogers. Can you make sure that with respect to the changing calendar from the 21st to the 23rd, that we use all available methods of communicating that to the community? Robocall and website and all of our methods. And also, if you could please promote the play as much as possible to the community. That would be a really great way for us to all connect with our theater group. And I know they've missed doing live performances, so I hope they get a good turnout. Are there any questions for Dr. Rogers with respect to his superintendent's report before we move on? Okay. Dr. Ruffo, do you have a report on the Citizens Advisory Committee for Finance?
Yes, I do. The Citizens Advisory Committee for Finance met on November 19th, where the administration and committee members discussed the reports of the external auditor, and that included the financial statements for the year and June 30th, 2020, as well as the extra classroom activity reports. We went over the highlights of both of those reports and then discussed the implementation of GASB 84 regarding fiduciary activities and how that may change things potentially with student activities for next year. We also updated the committee on the status of the RFP for external auditor and let them know that we will be starting our RFPs for claims and internal auditors following that. And the next meeting is scheduled for February 9th, 2021, where we expect to go over the internal auditor's report and also have a preliminary discussion for the 2021-22 budget.
Thank you, Dr. Ruffo. There's no correspondence or legislative items today, so we will begin audience to the public. For those of you who wish to speak to audience to the public, you must first come to the podium. You'll be recognized by the chair, and you will please leave your name and address both in the ledger at the podium, and also speak that to us, since you must be a resident in order to speak at audience to the public. You'll have your first 4 minutes to address the board, and then the next person can come to the podium. And when everyone in the audience has had the opportunity to share their first 4 minutes of comments, we will do our best to respond to them. If at that point there's anyone who wants to follow-up comment or ask follow-up questions, then please feel free to come up at that point, and then we'll do our best to respond to your follow-up questions. There's no polling of the board. There's no talking about specific teachers or students, obviously for privacy reasons and to comply with our legal obligations. So with that, please feel free to come up to the podium.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Penny Absolos. I live on 28 Colony Lane. I have a first grader that is attending South Grove Elementary School and an 8th grader that is attending HBT.
My questions are related to if we start the 20% random testing, and I have a couple. Would it be, how do we select the 20% of students that will be tested? Is there a percentage per grade? Is it a percentage per entire school between the children? When Dr. Rogers mentioned that it will be either in school or after school with parental consent, will that also include parental or custodial supervision?
Thank you. Are there any, you have 4 minutes, so are those your only questions?
That's my only question.
Okay,
yeah.
great. If you could take your seat and allow the next person to come up, we'll do our best to respond to your questions as soon as that's finished. Is there anyone else for audience to the public today? Going once? Twice? Okay.
Thank you for your questions. I can describe what some of the other school districts have done, and I think there's some merit in the approaches that they've taken, but I'll start first with what the rules are. You asked a couple of good questions. Does it have to be by grade or by school? So the zone designations are by school. So it may be, and this is the case in both Great Neck and Massapequa, some of the schools in the district are in the zone, some of the schools in the district are not in the zone. It is only the schools that are in the zone that must test. Does the testing have to be sampled 20% of first grade, 20% of second grade, 20% of third grade? No, it just has to be 20% of the entire population of people that are live in the building. So that, let's say it's our high school, as an example, there are students who are there every other day, both would count as the number. There are staff who are there every day, they would count as well. So all of those people, the A-day students, the B-day students, and all the staff would be added up, and that's the total number of people of which you need to get 20%. So if it turned out to be 22% of staff and, I'm making this up, 18% of students, that would still be okay as long as the overall number was 20%. And it wouldn't matter if it was 19% of freshmen and 21% of sophomores, that wouldn't matter either. It's just 20% of that school census, and all lives, all souls in the school are considered equal. It's just 20% of that. And the rules sometimes seem perplexing because it's by school. If it was just the very eastern part of the district and Walt Whitman was in the zone, even though kids from Walt Whitman might have older siblings who go to HBT, if HBT was not in the zone, the older siblings would not have to be tested, just the younger siblings, because they attend the school that is in the zone. So you might say, well, if that area is a zone, it should be about the families, but that's just not the way the program is structured. I don't make it up, I just report it. So what school districts have done to identify the population is they have done random, some sort of random way of generating a list of people from the names of all the kids that are there in person and just notify the parents. And typically what they've done is put out a larger number than would be necessary in order to achieve the 20%. And it's not necessary to use the school's Plan A or Plan B mechanism. We're allowed, it's entirely okay to accept testing results from any other testing opportunity. So if that's, you're going to an urgent care center, your own personal pediatrician, you have a test from a hospital, the only thing that matters is that it has to be a recent test. Off the top of my head, I don't remember how many days, but let's just call it 4 days. It has to be a test that you got sometime in the last 4 days. But if you don't want to do this through the school district, you get asked to provide a test, you go and get it somewhere at your own pediatrician and furnish us with it, that works. Parents will have a lot of choice in how they comply with this. And again, I wouldn't choose to do any of this if it wasn't necessary, but we do really want to try and preserve in-person learning if at all possible, and this is the path to do that.
Dr. Rogers, I believe also a part of that question was how do we select them?
I'm sorry, I thought I answered that. We would do that at random. We would yes. So Ms. Frankel is reminding me, a number of school districts that are not in yellow zones yet have already sent permission slips home to parents so that they can start to accumulate a body of people that have already got permission slips on file. That obviously makes sense to me as well, and so we'll pursue that process as well. But the sampling will be done initially by random sampling. Obviously, if a lot of those people have permission slips on file already, that makes things simpler, and then we follow up with the ones who don't have permission slips on file in order to get to that sample that we need. Sure. Ms. Frankel asked me to talk a little bit about parental supervision. So the way the program has worked in these other school districts that have done the testing in schools is that the testing operation is on site for, let's say, a full instructional day, and during the course of the day, students are brought down, they have their noses swabbed, and they return to class. You don't have to isolate them while you're waiting for the test because this is not a for-cause test. They're not exhibiting symptoms. This is what's called surveillance testing. So it's very brief, and they don't have to wait around for the results because that's not what we're looking for. The districts that have set this testing up have experienced that most parents are okay with their students just going down and getting tested during the school day, but some have wanted to be present for the testing. And so what I think is, of the various methods I've heard to do this, the one that I think probably is the easiest is at the end of the day, having additional time at the end of the day so that the parent can go to the school and accompany their child for the test while they're picking the child up at the end of the day and then leaving. So it's a trip that the parent is likely to have made to the school anyway. They can accompany the child, but then we're not having visitors on site in the building during the school day, which is something that we've tried to avoid. So that was something my colleague came up with. It seems to make sense to me. We'd have to work to operationalize it, but it's a way of, if a parent did want to accompany their child, they could.
Okay, is there anyone who would like any follow-up time? If there is, you can come up to the podium for 4 minutes.
Are these rapid tests that we're conducting? That's my first question. And if they are rapid tests and there is an asymptomatic child that tests positive, how is that handled then at that point?
You still have 4 minutes. Is there anything else?
No, that's...
Okay, great. Please take your seat. Thank you for your questions.
Another terrific question. So the Plan A test that would be administered by the independent company is a PCR test. So those results would not be available immediately. They would be available probably 3 days or 4 days after the fact. Obviously, if there's a positive in there, we would end up isolating the child and following our COVID protocols. If we go to Plan B, the test that the state is making available is by Abbott Labs, and it's called Binax, B-I-N-A-X, Now, N-O-W. And the Binax Now test is a rapid test, and the results are available in 15 minutes. If there were to be a positive case there, we would follow the same protocol that we would use if in the middle of the day a student said, I have a headache, or started to show signs of fever, or threw up or something like that. We'd bring them down to the nurse, we'd put them in the isolation room, we'd call their parents, and we would wait, someone would wait with them while we wait for the parents to come up. But yes, if we In Plan B, the surveillance testing is using a rapid test, so we would execute our plan based on what we learned. Plan A is a PCR test. So again, these are designed as surveillance tests, not as for-cause tests.
Okay, thank you for your questions, and Dr. Rogers, thank you for answering them. We will move on, that closes audience to the public, and we'll now move on to discussion items. We have a discussion item on the yellow zone and possible COVID testing, and we've now gone through it. Is there any board member who has any comments with respect to the testing? Okay. The next item for discussion is the proposed Amazon warehouse project. And really what we're looking for is a conversation, one, about the brownfield cleanup report and the recommendations that we've been given by Nora Brew today. And then in addition, I'm looking for discussion as to whether the board would like to direct our administration to make comments during the public comment period to the DEC. So that's distinguished from any potential future comments with respect to the town or any other aspect of the project. Today we really focused on the brownfield cleanup and the methods that are being discussed by Amazon. Their request to do a cover system. Another option is to do nothing, and then another option is for a full excavation of the entire site. So with that, does any board member want to begin the discussion? I'm happy to do it. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Tracy. Okay, so I would ask that we conduct a traffic study of the environment of the area, so the impact to the buses and the children and the parents, that there's not over congestion. That would include what areas Amazon plans to drive to, assuming it's beyond Syosset and Woodbury. The other thing was I would shoot high, so to speak, and go with the approach for alternative one, track one, unrestricted use for the cleanup, and put that into that's the statement, the comments that we would submit, right? Okay. Yeah, that's what I have down here. Thank you.
You're welcome. From my perspective, it sounds like the alternative one, which is the full cleanup for unrestricted use, poses more of a risk to our nearby school environments, because it's digging and excavation work for a prolonged period of time. I believe it was 4.25 years that would take place, and over 600, was it yards of, I don't remember the measurement, of soil, as opposed to the cover system, which is accepted in the environmental community and as being successful at containing the contaminants from exposure to human life and the surrounding area. So for me, the cover system is okay, but I would like to make comments to the DEC. Nora had mentioned a number of plans that she found either to be insufficient or absent. And certainly, I think for decisions to be made by the DEC, they should hear the concerns that the school districts have with respect to the work that's being proposed, especially the cleanup work. Nora had mentioned dust mitigation and runoff and air quality plans, and all of those are critical. The board had written over 100 pages of comments at the last proposed development. And those comments, many of them indicated concerns that still exist today, even though the development is very different. We do care about traffic, and we will be undergoing a traffic study. We do care about air quality. We do care about runoff. We do care about noise pollution. We do care about how our students are going to be able to play outside during the course of construction. And of course, we do care about all of these same things when it comes to the remediation plan that Amazon has developed. And so I am definitely in favor of preserving our interests and protecting our community by sharing the areas of concern that we have and impressing upon the DEC that they should have all of the information that they need in order to make a safe and the safest decision in order to protect our students and our staff and our surrounding community. Andy?
Yeah, I think we should go with the recommendation of Walden, the option number 2. And I think we should definitely incorporate statements from the report in a letter. And I agree with Tracy that, obviously, this board has expressed extensively in the past of the concern for the safety and well-being of our students and our residents. So I definitely think that's what we should do.
Thanks, Ms. Frankel, if I may.
Yes.
I just want to distinguish that the remedy number 2 is not Walden's recommendation. It is the recommendation of the property owner and their recommendation of their preferred remedy to the DEC. We commented on their preferred recommendation, but it's not Walden's recommendation.
Okay, Rob Gershon?
Yes, I agree with Tracy and Andy. I also think that the traffic study idea is something we should pursue, particularly concerning the trucks that would be going up and down Robbins Lane. But I'm okay with alternate number 2, the CAP system, and I do think we should also send comments to New York State DEC.
Yes, is that Susan or Anna? Which one? Susan, hold on one second. We're having trouble hearing you. Susan, can you start again? I apologize, but you were difficult to hear.
In place, and that there's definitely some kind of independent oversight to make sure that whatever the most stringent protocols are in place are adhered to, and that the community and the kids that are so close to there will be protected. And I'm also in favor of the traffic investigation to see, what's going to happen with the congestion and the noise and the trucks and everything in that regard also.
Thanks. Susan, can you hear me?
Oh, wait, yes, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes. So did you say, I heard that you were in favor of comments with respect to the independent monitor and also traffic. Did you say anything before then? Because you were too soft for us to hear that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just expressing concern for the children and the community that are so close to the construction site, and that it's really important that we give comments, because we need to make sure that the most stringent protocols are in place to make sure the kids in the community are protected, and that I feel very strongly about an independent overseer to make sure that whatever the most stringent protocols that are put in place will be adhered to, because I know we all feel this way, keeping the kids and the community safe is absolutely the most important thing, and we have to make sure that, that we do whatever we can to make sure the most stringent protections are put in place. And I'm also in favor of, doing the traffic survey and figuring that out as well.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, we did release an RFP late last week to secure a traffic consultant, and the role the traffic consultant would play, and I don't mean to split hairs, I just want to be careful, not to do a traffic study, but there is a traffic study included with the proposed site plan and development, and so we would review the study that was already done with our own traffic engineer, because that study contains the information about how many vans there would be, what directions the vans would go in, how many would go in X direction, how many would go in Y direction. So we wouldn't create an independent study, we would evaluate the study that exists.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Is there anyone else who wishes to comment? Carol.
Okay, thank you. Since the construction site is very, very close to two schools, and then especially South Grove, I would like the board to send comments to the DEC and about the pollutions and also the noise and the trucks and all of that to DEC. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to offer comments with respect to the proposed plan for remediation? Yes, Chris?
Yeah, I actually think none of the alternatives are suitable, but the reason I'm choosing alternative one is because it's $143 million, and they're not going to build anything, okay? They're going to walk away from it. I don't think anything should ever be built there, personally. On alternative two, you're going to have the water, there's flaws in all these options, but the alternative two, you're going to have the water rain off, and it's going to go into a recharge basin. You're going to further have that water go down into the soil, further polluting, bringing down those chemicals, and eventually it's hitting the water supply. It may be hundreds of feet down. Gravity's going to pull that down there. None of us are scientists, and these toxins and chemicals have been there for years, over 70 years. So, that's my rationale for this.
Okay, thank you. With no one else having comments, it sounds like the board is directing comments, and the comments would be with respect to the areas of concern for the project, with respect to dust and all the recommendations that Nora had indicated.
So just so I'll clarify what I believe I understand our direction to be. We will comment on the RAWP as it is currently written. They have expressed, the developer, have expressed their preferred remedy. We are going to comment on the preferred remedy that they have expressed by critiquing that remedy and offering our observations on what we believe are inadequacies in what is proposed because there are missing plans.
I did not hear a consensus on a critique of the remedy of the cover system. What I heard from the board, not enough people indicated that, only one did. So the critiques that I heard from the board were with respect to the deficiencies in what was submitted in terms of mitigating noise and air pollution and dust and traffic, and the areas of concern that we have mentioned back when Syosset Park was being developed. But I didn't hear from enough people today. Yes, critiquing. Oh, so that's two. So that's two people. But, well, I heard two. I heard you and Chris. Did you critique the cover system? Yeah. So that's three. It's still not enough. I have Andy and me. 1 second, Chris. I have Andy and me and Rob, who indicated that they'd be okay with the cover system. Then, well, I didn't hear Susan say anything with respect to the cover system. And then Chris and Tom with respect to critiquing the cover system. And that's 3 and 3. And I've heard from no one else with respect to that issue. So if there's any other person from the board that wants to discuss that, that would be helpful.
Did we lose sound?
Susan, did you have something to say?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm not sure if they gave us an opinion on what they felt was the safest of choice 1 or choice 2, whether to clean up the dangers that are posed by cleaning up the whole land, by carting everything away and the dust and what might be turned over by doing that, or the capping of it, and which one they felt was safer for the community and the kids. Did they give an opinion?
They did pros and cons for us, so not an opinion, choose one. They had mentioned the 4.5 years it would take for the full excavation for number 1, and the amount of materials that would have to be excavated for that. With the cover system, they indicate, but on the flip side, all of the material would go away. And then with respect to the cover system, they talked about the fact that it would only take 10 months and that it's an acceptable contamination containment system in the community that has been successful over time. So I guess Dr. Rogers has clarified that the plan that they've proposed is for number 2, and each one of us who has spoken has critiqued the plan in one way or another, regardless of whether the critique was due to their wanting number 1 over number 2. We are critiquing the plan itself. So in that regard, I think we can safely say we're directing our consultants to put together a a comment document that we can send to the DEC with respect to that plan. And it would be a critique of the plan in its entirety with respect to the issues of concern that we have. Okay. Is there anyone on the board that has questions for Nora and Carrie Ann? Do they need clarification on anything? Okay, no. All right, yes, Chris?
That's all right. So, Dr. Rogers, if I understand you correctly, which I said earlier, all the options are flawed. So if we were to critique the vendor for Amazon that wants to, they're proposing number 2, and we comment on the flaws or the issues and concerns we have with that. Is that what you're saying?
So they have proposed a remedial action work plan, and perhaps Carrie Ann and Nora can get closer to the microphone so you can support me if needed. There is a proposed remedial action work plan. It has been accepted by the DEC as complete. It is now out for public comment before it will reach whatever its final form is, and at some point in that process, they will be given permission to execute the remedial action work plan. We can certainly offer any comments we want. We can say we would like a different approach better, but the only plan that is there that is complete enough to be critiqued is the preferred plan that they're proposing. So there isn't an option 1 plan to critique. So if we're going to say option 2, the plan you're trying to implement lacks a really good community air monitoring program, it lacks a really good stormwater protection plan, it lacks the following things. Option 1 doesn't even discuss any of those because it's not even explored. So there is no option 1 to critique, there's just the plan that they've proposed, and that is the plan that is out for public comment right now. So what I was trying to suggest, and maybe did inartfully, was we have this RAWP, the time has come to make comments on the RAWP, we have the words of the RAWP in front of us to comment on, we think that it has some inadequacies in terms of the comprehensiveness of the mitigation controls that are included, and our comments would start with, if this is the remedy that the DEC is about to approve, then here are the things that it is lacking and that we think need to be improved. And so when I said critique, there is only one plan. They don't explore option 3, which is do nothing and build nothing. Nora explored option 3 a little bit, but that's not really explored in the RAWP, and they don't explore option 1 either. So the one question, Ms. Frankel alluded to it, is which would be, and actually Ms. Falco did as well, which would be more impactful to the school district because of its proximity of the 3 plans. Probably the least impactful would be to disturb nothing, plan 3, but that doesn't sound like it's on offer at this point. And then, it is a question for Nora as a scientist, what would be least impactful to our adjacent properties. And again, my direction on your behalf to Nora and Carrie Ann, I've asked them just to call balls and strikes. We have 2 properties nearby. What is most impactful to those 2 properties so that we can make comments that are most protective of the students and staff that we have on those sites?
Yes, so in terms of construction impacts, which is what's going to, the school district will feel the brunt of, I think, option 2, which has considerably shorter remediation time of 10 months is the estimate, as opposed to over 4 years. It's just in terms of impacts on the school, I would say that alternative 2, which is the preferred remedy in the remedial action work plan, would create less impact to the district.
And the rationale for that is?
Time frame, and the amount of trucking of soils off-site, dust generation. You're going to be digging up over 600,000 cubic yards of soil containing residual levels of contamination. So that would, it's just opportunity for more dust generation, more truck traffic, more truck exhaust, noise, stormwater potential impacts. I mean, the plans that are developed would, they would apply to either alternative 1 or alternative 2. It's just in terms of time frame and quantity of material that's being dug up and disturbed and moved around. It would be significantly less under alternative 2.
But to Mr. Rotolo's question, there still has to be material that is moved around with the capping option in order to put the cap into place. And this further question was around the excavation that will be necessary for any construction of a building on the site. When you made your comments, you said the remedy is the cap. So it is one construction project. The construction of the cap and the warehouse and the parking lots is all one 10-month construction job, as opposed to 2 construction jobs, 1 a remediation job, followed by a site construction. Is that accurate?
Correct, yes. Yes. Okay.
Those are the short-term risks, correct?
Yes.
So what's the long-term risk to the district after the construction is done? Because that chemicals are still there.
Right.
All
But
we're just talking about, for the next 10 months or however long it's going to take.
Right, understood.
But then what happens after? Like, what's our risk? The schools are right there.
Mm-hmm. Well, the soils would be covered by the cap. They're not.
But we're opening a whole new can of worms, right? They're going to start doing it's not like this stuff just stays. It's dynamic. Once they start digging it up, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how much more stuff is going to be dug up. It's like when they started trenching the Hudson for all the toxins that were in it. They actually then stopped because they were dredging up so many things that they actually just left it alone.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Right. I mean, that's what we always say. You
just leave it.
There's always unknown.
It's like asbestos. Just leave it.
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I mean, there are, alternatives that are sound alternatives like capping.
Right. So is there a long-term effect?
I would say there is not. The copper and the semi-volatile contaminants, they tend to stay absorbed to the soil particles, so they're not going to leach out. It's not as if you have a pool of gasoline or a solvent that they volatilize underground, and they can cause, they have a much greater tendency to change phase. So if they did come into contact with water, that those kind of compounds have a tendency to get flushed out and kind of transfer into the liquid phase and would travel with water. But the contaminants of concern being copper and the semi-volatiles, that's not how they behave. And there were, the concentrations are, when you compare them to the commercial use soil cleanup objectives, there are exceedances, certainly, but had they done nothing, all along, I mean, there's been a considerable amount of contamination that had been removed from the site over the years, beginning back in the early 90s. So I'm just speaking from experience in terms of other site remedies that I've reviewed and been involved in, and you look at the risks and the contamination levels, and if there was a concentrated area where you had elevated concentrations and you could go attack that, you call that a hot spot where you dig it out and you get rid of it. That's certainly a good component of a remedy if the site conditions are conducive to that. But if you have widespread, relatively lower level contamination, sometimes the construction impacts outweigh the benefit of, just digging it up and getting every speck of contamination off the site. So it's a balancing act, and there's no one-size-fits-all remedy that applies across the board. But capping and cover systems, when you have soil contaminated with these residual levels of such compounds that are not those which would readily flush into groundwater, capping and cover systems are appropriate remedies.
Excuse me, with the capping, okay, you're still going to have the water runoff, okay? So where is that, how are they going to handle that water? We have to talk about that remediation, about water, okay? And
are you talking about?
You don't know for sure how many chemicals Zero Wire has in that ground, because they have certain things that they state, okay, cakes and stored underground, and that's only what they told us. There's things that we don't know, okay? And the cap isn't the cap a membrane?
No, it would just be concrete.
Well, they plan to asphalt the whole property, right?
The majority
so
of
where
it.
is that water going to go?
It's going to be, I'm not precisely sure of the exact site plans.
Okay, so they have they have to get back to us to let us know what they're going to do with that water, right? Because there's going to be a lot of water.
So, I mean, the parking lots would have, catch basins or some sort of drainage structures that would collect.
And what, go in the sewer or go down in the ground?
It would go into recharge basins or these underground stormwater collection cisterns, or I'm not sure exactly what chambers, that then the water would seep into the ground.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments on this topic? Nobody? Okay. There's...
I just want to give Nora and Carrie Ann the balance of their night back. So thank you very much for your help, and we'll see you soon.
Good night. Okay, moving on to A items. A1 is the approval of staff changes for certified staff. May I have a motion, please? Carol Chang, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? A2 is the approval of stipends and hourly rate activities. May I have a motion, please? Rob Gershon, seconded by Andy Feldman. Are there any questions? All in favor? Yes.
Okay. Are we on 13A2? Yes, we are. Yeah, okay. All right, so it starts off where related service providers, some are revised. It talks about special ed to receive homebound related services. It mentions a psychologist and a doctor and another person here. But then, is the coaching recommendations part of the same motion?
I'm seeing that there's a misprint in the agenda. I apologize. This is the caption for this should have read about the appointment of stipends and hourly rate activities for certified staff. The paragraph that's below it relates just to the first two under Summer CSE, CPSE. Those are the related service providers. Everything else is the other stipends and hourly rate activities for certified staff, and that's the coaching recommendations beyond that. And then there's two more captions: appointment of extracurricular assignments, HPT, and Syosset High School. So the first caption that says approval of stipend and hourly rate activities should have come probably, well, actually, they're all certified staff. It's just the first paragraph applies to the first table. The second, coaching recommendations, applies to the second table. The third paragraph applies to the third table, and so on.
Okay, so my other question is, we got different sports here, and this is recurring because we proved different other stipends in other meetings. But here we got basketball, we got sports that we don't really have these sports, do we? We're not doing these sports, are we?
So right now the status of sports is that the state Section 8 has determined that there will be 3 seasons of sports, but that all 3 seasons will run after the first of the year. So the winter sports will go first, followed by the fall sports, followed by the spring sports. They will be slightly abbreviated seasons that operate during the new year. There's certainly an open question as to whether any of the high-risk sports will operate, and there, no decisions have been made. The governor 2 weeks ago had said that he was going to give guidance on the high-risk sports, but then in a press conference said that given the escalating rates of COVID, he was going to delay giving us that guidance. But there is right now on the books a plan to have sports. And what I also know is that these coaches have been providing their players with activities, drills, guidance for them to try and stay sharp for these seasons when they do occur.
Okay. But Dr. Rogers, I don't know if we're going to do the 3 seasons. I don't know if you're getting the value we would have had if we didn't have this pandemic. I don't think so. But, this alone, I added it up. It's over $200,000. So I'm just concerned that are we really getting value for the money here? If they're doing, some type of things other than the actual sport itself, like we used to.
Well, I think all of our coaches have tried to make the best of a bad situation, and I know a lot of them consider themselves to be year-round coaches. They may have a season, but they're in touch with their athletes all year. Particularly last spring, they went out of their way to try and put together training plans for the athletes. These were the spring coaches in particular whose athletes lost their season. I know those spring athletes are really hoping that they'll be able to get their season back this year, having missed a year. And I also know that their coaches have been doing these after-school and weekend activities to try and keep the kids as sharp as they can. And one other activity that our coaches do is they work with, we just had our commitment day, I believe 2.5 weeks ago, and the coaches work with college coaches to try and encourage those college coaches to take a look at our athletes for potential scholarship programs. And that is also a year-round activity that they conduct. So yes, we see our coaches on the sidelines and at practice. That's not the whole sum of what they do. Obviously, we'd like to get kids out there competing as much as possible. We've tried to salvage as much of this fall as we can, and I think they've actually done a remarkable job of providing kids with opportunities to do things safely. It hasn't, tennis has been some games and matches, but, others have just been drills and training, socially distanced with masks. But you have kids still working on their shooting for basketball. I see the volleyball players working on what are called hitting lines, and they're getting a little bit out of it. They're doing what they can.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, I know for sure that if you ask most, if not all, of these coaches how they thought of their role, they wouldn't really consider it just a game time position, but they are coaching these kids, in life and attitude, and they're doing that now, even though they're not playing games. They're keeping their kids on their teams together because they know that teamwork on the field means that they have to be a team off the field, and off the field is unfortunately where they are right now. So they're doing a lot of work to try and keep their kids motivated and looking forward to the season, and making sure they're working out and doing the after-school fitness center. And so I know I certainly appreciate all the work they're putting in right now, even though they're not playing games and all they want is to be on that field. So just my 2 cents. So with A2, are there any other questions? Tom Rotolo.
Dr. Rogers, since it's an abbreviated season, are these abbreviated stipends?
No, these are the regular stipends. And again, we've viewed this as the coach's role is not just the days that they're on the sidelines or at a match, but a lot of them see their role as being year-round, and the season is just sort of an encapsulation of the time that they put into students. But as Ms. Frankel said, they're working with these youngsters all year round. So the decisions about whether some sports would be canceled altogether haven't been made. We did pay the stipend in the spring because the coaches provided them with alternative opportunities when the spring season was canceled. I would end up looking to the coaches to provide me, as they did last spring, with an outline of how they intended to make sure that they were still helping their athletes compete at their sport, even if they're not able to have inter-school competition. So wrestling is certainly a high-risk sport, but it may be that we put together weight training opportunities for them so that they can become stronger, compete better. There may be film that they can watch with the coaches to learn new moves, understand what the right counter move is for something an opponent may do. It may not be that they get the chance to sit on the side of the mat and watch their youngsters compete, but they may be able to do things to help them still get better as wrestlers. And what we did last spring was I met with all of the coaches, and I asked them to furnish me with ideas that, and my criteria for them was it has to be robust enough that I can put it in front of the Board of Education. And I would have the same lens for this. It's okay, it isn't going to be what it used to be. There's a lot of things this year that aren't what they used to be. Doesn't mean it can't still be good. And I don't know what the right thing is for the wrestling, but the wrestling coach has better ideas than me. And same thing for football. He'll have better ideas than I do, but I'll expect them to come to me with how are they going to use this time with these youngsters to keep them sharp.
Any other questions with respect to A2? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? A3 is the appointment of a per diem substitute principal, revised, Monica Corona for Robbins Lane. May I have a motion, please? Carol Chang, seconded by Andy Feldman. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? A4 is the ratification of the stipulation of agreement with the Syosset Principals Association. May I have a motion, please? Chris DiFilippo, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B1 is the approval of recommendations for the Committee of Special Education. May I have a motion, please? Tom Rotolo, seconded by Chris Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B2 is the approval of recommendations from the Committee of Preschool Special Education. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B3 is the approval of the 2021-2022 school calendar. May I have a motion, please? Chris DiFilippo, seconded by Carol Chang. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the calendar will be available on the district website. B4 is the second reading and adoption of policies, school district records, parent and family engagement, board members, school district officers, and employee code of ethics, student attendance, student wellness, and student records. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C1 is the authorization for service contracts. May I have a motion, please? Chris DiFilippo, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C2 is the authorization for special education and or nursing contracts. May I have a motion, please? Chris Ulrich, seconded by Tom Rotolo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C3 is the authorization for contracts for federal Part B funds. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C4 is the authorization for piggybacking. May I have a motion, please? Tom Rotolo, seconded by Chris Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Oh, Chris, sorry.
Yes. Is this just like a contingency because it relates to environmental consulting and testing, and because we already have vendors that you're using in the district? Is this just someone else you want to have on the list?
This is the environmental consultant that we use, and this is how we contract with them by piggybacking on the Hewlett-Woodmere contract. This is J.C. Broderick. They're the ones that do the environmental consulting for when there's a remediation that needs to take place somewhere, and they've done indoor air sampling for us. They do the radon testing in the buildings. That's the function they provide. And if there's like an asbestos remediation that needs to take place, they do the air monitoring after the work is done to make sure that the place is safe to re-enter. So we've been using them for years. This is just the contracting arrangement that we use to get a good, to get the best value in terms of their consulting fee.
Right. And sorry, it's also for Hewlett-Woodmere to become part of it. Is that it?
This is a Hewlett-Woodmere contract. They ran the bidding process. The law allows us, instead of running our own bidding process, to take advantage of the one that they already ran. So it's Hewlett-Woodmere's bid, but it's just our contract with J.C. Broderick taking advantage of the pricing that they were able to get.
Are there any other questions on C4? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C5 is the authorization to participate in a cooperative bid through Omnia. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C6 is the award of bids. May I have a motion, please? Carol Chang, seconded by Chris DiFilippo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C7 is the award of bid to Palace Electrical Contractors for electrical construction at Southwoods Middle School. May I have a motion, please? Rob Gershon, seconded by Andy Feldman. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C8 is the award of bid to Palace Electrical Contractors for electrical construction at H.B. Thompson Middle School. May I have a motion, please? Carol Chang, seconded by Krista Filippo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C9 is the authorization for change orders. May I have a motion, please? Rob Gershon, seconded by Andy Feldman. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C10 is the authorization for deduct change orders. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C11 is the acceptance of donations of Nikon camera and flash and 3 bags of golf clubs. May I have a motion, please? Rob Gershon, seconded by Andy Feldman. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C12 is the acceptance to dispose of broken, surplus, and/or obsolete equipment and books. May I have a motion, please? Krista Filippo, seconded by Carol Chang. Are there any questions? Chris Elrick.
Yeah, Dr. Rogers, I noticed in this particular one, it was a massive inventory of electronics. 400 or 500 tablets, 100 network switches, a lot of equipment. Where does that go? Are we liquidating it to a surplus company? Are we recycling? Are we going to a landfill? What's happening with this?
Dr. Rufo, can you talk a little bit about what happens to the surplus electronic equipment, please?
We have in the past had contracts with organizations, I'm not sure if they're through BOCES or not, where they come and they dispose of them properly, because obviously you have to be careful of anything that's stored in them. So I don't know what's in place now, but that in the past we had had different contracts with organizations that do that. I mean, and the disposals are typically because the materials have become obsolete, are incompatible, and IT does a lot of work to make sure that anything that is could be used is used and moves it around to other buildings. So these are things that really are not working anymore.
But do we know where it goes? Because if we're concerned about the data, we have to make sure it's wiped. And if the equipment is still working, there are surplus buyers who will actually buy it, take it, and refurbish it.
We have looked into those. We also have, in the past, done auctions of, typically not all, it depends on the type of technology, but before you have to do that, there's also that data cleansing that needs to happen. So we can find out specifically what's in place for these items that are on. Okay?
Are there any other questions on C12? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C13 is the authorization for insurance policies. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? Tom Ricciolo.
What we usually do once we renew all our contracts July 1st, why is it before?
Again, I'll turn this one over to Dr. Rufo, who manages all things insurance.
Yes, you make a good point. We do usually renew contracts July 1. Just because of the timing of insurance, we got into this doing it on a calendar year when we did our RFP and when it got in place. But this is actually on here to move us to a July 1. These are actually just for the 6 months of coverage that will take us to July 1st. So this year, or well, in July next year, you're going to see these on again. These are extensions to get us 6 more months so that we can get on a school year calendar with our insurance.
Are there any other questions on C13? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion to adjourn.